One more shot.
With its spectacular location spanning several important bodies of water, Istanbul has been settled by humans since before recorded history. Bridging and connecting two continents, Europe and Asia, Istanbul is an urban centre where various cultures and religions have combined, survived and succeeded each other over the centuries. Any visit to Istanbul would not be complete without the traditional yet unforgettable boat excursion up the Bosphorus, the winding strait that separates Europe and Asia. Its shores offer a delightful mixture of past and present. Overshadowing Istanbul's traditional architecture is one of the world's largest suspension bridges, the Bosphorus Bridge, which links the Balkans and Anatolia, and thus Europe and Asia. The dream to create a suspension bridge between the two continents started a long time ago. According to historical records, the first bridge linking the two sides of the Bosphorus was commissioned by the Persian Emperor Darius in 490 BC. The Bosphorus is one of the most popular parts of Istanbul among its inhabitants. Its shores are lined with fine neighbourhoods, Ottoman palaces, old wooden villas, hotels, parks and gardens, mosques and fortresses. This imposing, beautiful military structure is impressive as its towers and walls twist and turn. Bosphorus comes from a Thracian word which means passage of the cow, deriving from the legend of Io, who was one of Zeus's many lovers. When Hera, Zeus's wife, suspected her husband of being involved in a love affair with Io, Zeus converted Io into a small cow and tried to send her far away from Hera's rage. But Hera discovered her and sent big flies after the cow to bite and pester her. Over the centuries, the Bosphorus has been crossed by intrepid merchants, conquering armies, and many an adventurous spirit. Today, it's still popular with thousands of Istanbulers who commute daily along its length, with fishing vessels which try their luck in its waters, and tourists who ride its ferries from Eminonu to Anadolu Kavagi and back. The shores of the Bosphorus offer a delightful mixture of past and present, grand splendour and simple beauty. Modern hotels stand next to Yali, shorefront wooden villas and marble palaces alongside rustic stone fortresses, and elegant compounds neighbour small fishing villages. During the time of the Ottoman Empire, the residents of the Bosphorus consisted solely of fishermen, boatsmen and gardeners. Istanbul, the only city in the world built on two continents, has a strategic setting forming the city's destiny as an imperial capital for nearly 1600 years, the Roman, Byzantine and Ottoman empires. This metropolis is proud of its rich history and unequalled natural beauty. Galata is on the European side of Istanbul, both geographically and culturally. It was established as a Western, Latin and Catholic colony, right next to Constantinople, capital of the Eastern Orthodox Byzantine Empire. Galata Tower is one of the oldest towers made by the Byzantium Emperor Anastasius in 507 under the name of the Lighthouse Tower. It was originally made of wood. When Sultan Mehmet conquered Istanbul, the tower fell under the management of the Ottoman Empire. In the 15th century, the tower was used as a dungeon, and in the 16th century as a fire tower. The tower is believed to be essentially the same size as it was in the Genovese period. It stands 35 meters above sea level, at a distance of 425 meters from the shore of the Golden Horn. One of the matters to be dealt with first by Mehmet the Conqueror was to meet the city's running water requirements. Piping water from springs and constructing fountains were regarded as amongst the most honourable acts of charity, and no charge was made for using the water. The hundreds of fountains, both large and small, that were built in the course of 500 years in almost every street in Istanbul were an indication of the importance attached to water by charitable people. Since, like the mosque and coffee houses, fountains served as meeting places for local people, they played an important social role. Life in Istanbul is better witnessed nowhere than by spending some time on one of the city's major arteries. Istiklal Avenue is one of Istanbul's most famous streets. A nostalgic tram runs the almost 3-kilometer length of Istiklal Street, beginning at Taksim Square and ending at Tunnel Square. The tram's subway system is the second oldest in the world, rivaling only that of London's Underground. It's a popular option for those wanting to escape the crowds or rest their feet, and is a quaint way to enjoy the 19th century architecture and energy of Istiklal from up high. It was reinstalled in the early 1990s with the aim of reviving the historic atmosphere of the district. The city of Istanbul has two completely separate heritage tram systems, one on the European side another on the Asian side. After closing the tram network in the mid-1960s, the people of Istanbul thought that they'd removed an important obstacle to modernizing the urban transport system, and that traffic in the city could move faster than before. But this assumption was shortly proved wrong.
Tamarindo.
During the Ottoman period, this avenue was called Kade-i-Kabir, or Grand Avenue, and was a popular spot for Ottoman intellectuals. It also became a centre for European foreigners and the local Italian and French Levantines, who referred to it as the Grande Rue de Pera. The cosmopolitan Istiklal Avenue is surrounded by an array of historical and politically significant buildings. The street's atmosphere changes according to the time of day and the day of the week, though it almost always ensures an assault on the senses that will leave an indelible impression of a dynamic and vibrant street culture. The city has many architecturally significant entities. Throughout its long history, Istanbul has acquired a reputation for being a cultural and ethnic melting pot. Starting from the early 19th century, the areas around Istiklal Avenue were filled with grandiose embassy buildings belonging to prominent European states, and rows of European, mostly neoclassical, and later Art Nouveau-style buildings started to appear on both flanks of the avenue. Istanbul became a major centre of the Art Nouveau movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. When a great fire destroyed about 3,000 buildings in Beyoğlu in the Pera district, it created a sort of opportunity. The area, thus emptied, was in a short time covered with Art Nouveau apartments. With the establishment of city gas and electricity, Pera Beyoğlu became the glittering centre of European lifestyle in Istanbul. The Cité de Pera was to be the Ottoman Empire's best, a monument that even Paris would be proud of. The site can be described as a miniature version of the famous Galleria in Milan in Italy. The site was originally occupied by the Naum Theatre, which was burnt down during the Great Fire of Pera in 1870. The theatre was frequently visited by Sultans Abdulaziz and Abdulhamid II, and hosted Giuseppe Verdi's play Il Trovatore before the opera houses of Paris. In 1908, the Cité de Pera was called Site Paza Passaggi because the building was purchased by the Grand Vizier Site Paza. In the early 20s, the passageway hosted white Russian women selling flowers. They were the noble Russians exiled from Russia after the revolution in 1917. Starting from the 1940s, more and more pubs, wine houses and taverns opened their doors in the Çiçek Pazarı, which gradually made the florists and residents of the flats move out. In 1980, all of a sudden, a great part of the building suddenly collapsed and it was closed. Luckily, the Art Deco windows and part of the ceiling have survived the collapse and can be admired today. There are plenty of wonderful flowers depicted in the windows and staircases. The building underwent major renovation in 1988 and reopened with its L-shaped, cobblestone-laden path, picturesque and enchanting atmosphere with rows of taverns and restaurants. In 2005, the roof and all the other visual parts were restored. Next to the flower market is Balik Patsari, which means fish market, an ideal place to try traditional Turkish food. The grand covered bazaar, Balik Patsari, houses underneath its canopies the finest fish that Turkey has to offer, along with exotic spices, fruits, vegetables, and even jewelry. Over the centuries, while people lived on the shores of the Bosphorus, dozens of world cuisines have met here. Greek olive oil and Roman baking, Slavic honey and Arabic sweets, Persian cheese, Seljuk meat products, and Ottoman dishes. This mix gave rise to one of the 3 best cuisines in the world, Turkish cuisine. This fish market is a wild passageway full of small fast food eateries, fresh vegetable market stalls, a sprinkling of other shops, and thronging with passers-by. Heavily scented by wafting spices and sizzling mussels and other fish, blazing in colour and displaying a curious accumulation of foodstuffs, make it altogether an interesting walk. Nevitzade is a small street parallel to Istiklal Avenue, located behind the historical Flower Passage and easily accessible via the Fish Bazaar. It's a whole street spilling over with tables, dedicating itself lovingly to the business of the meyhane or tavern, in a world of its own. The narrow passage is full to the brim with cafes, bars and meyhanes. A meyhane is a Turkish tavern which evolved through the country's centuries-long proximity to Greek culture. A night out at 1 basically involves the marathon consumption of the trademark anise-flavoured tipple raki. Another way to visit the city is to use the tunnel, a short underground railway line or funicular with 2 stations which connects 2 of the city's neighbourhoods. In the 19th century, the districts of Galata and Pera were the most important business areas in Constantinople. The 2 districts were connected by a network of extremely narrow and steep streets, impossible to circulate by vehicle. Work was completed in 1874 when the tunnel began to serve the Galata and Pera neighbourhoods. The government bought the tunnel establishments in 1939. The tunnel turned electric in 1971 and it took on its final state. In the same year, the original wooden cars were finally replaced by metal ones. Making 64,800 trips, totaling more than 37,000 kilometers a year, the tunnel carries 15,000 passengers per day with its 2 wagons on the line of Karaköy to Tunnel. Underground railways attract passengers with good station design. This often means extra effort, but it seems to pay off when a metro is more than just a means of transport, but something the residents can be proud of. Subway lines are networks with grand architecture, and designed from Art Deco to modernist to futuristic or just passenger-friendly and beautiful underground stations. Istanbul is an endless city from Anatolia to Rumeli, and it gets larger and larger every day, containing places which most people have not seen or even heard of. Istanbul is the Bosphorus. It's the historical peninsula. With its rough inlet and seaside mansions, and its streets surrounded by stone buildings, here is a little seaside town district that's preserved its unique structure. Colourful houses and the promenade near the Galata Bridge are favourite places for Istanbul's residents. According to a local legend, which is comparatively much older than the others, the Thracian king Bizas, who was the son of the nymph Semestra, had married Fidilaya, daughter of Barbizos, king of a region near Istanbul. It was this woman who's said to have founded Byzantium or Istanbul. Bridges hold a special fascination for people and tend to acquire their own stories and legends. The oldest recorded bridge in Istanbul was built over the Golden Horn in 1453 during the Turkish siege of the city. In the years 1502 to 1503, plans to construct a permanent bridge were discussed, and with this object, a design was sketched by Leonardo da Vinci. However, technical drawbacks made it impossible to realize this project, and another Italian artist, Michelangelo, was invited to design a bridge for Istanbul. Michelangelo rejected the proposal, and the idea of building a bridge here was shelved until the 19th century. The Galata Bridge provided an important symbolic link between the traditional city of Istanbul proper, site of the Imperial Palace, and principal religious and secular institutions of the empire, and the districts of Galata, Beyoğlu, Sizli and Marbiye, many of whose inhabitants were non-Muslims and where foreign merchants and diplomats lived and worked. The area in Sultanahmet Square has long been the centre of the various civilizations which ruled Istanbul. During the Roman and Byzantine eras, it was used as a hippodrome, while under the Ottoman Empire, it was an equestrian square. The column of Constantine Porphyrogenitus is made of stone blocks placed on a marble base. All that's known about this Byzantine monument is that it was restored and embellished in the 10th century by Constantine Porphyrogenitus VII. In 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, the bronze relief plaques that adorned the column were ripped off and melted down for reuse. The bottom of the pit approximately indicates the original level of the hippodrome. The serpentine column was originally erected in front of the Temple of Apollo in Delphi. The column, made of 3 entwined serpents supporting a huge golden bowl on their now missing heads, was a donation of the 33 Greek cities Federacy. The column is thought to have been brought by Constantine I in the 4th century AD. The upper jaw of one of the serpent's heads is on display at the Archaeological Museum. The obelisk was erected by the pharaoh Thutmosis III in the year 1450 BC in Egypt to commemorate his victories in Asia. It's known that a ship was built upon the commissioning of Justinianus to the Alexandrians to carry the obelisk to Istanbul. The obelisk is 20 meters long, with a 6-meter piece missing. It rests on 4 bronze blocks on a 6-meter-high marble base. The obelisk is also known as the Obelisk of Theodosius, named after the base it rests on. The reliefs on the base depict the battles of Theodosius I and his experiences in Istanbul. It's known that there was a bronze globe symbolizing the earth on top of the obelisk, and that this globe fell during an earthquake in 865 AD. There are Latin and Hellenistic inscriptions on the base. The Blue Mosque, one of Istanbul's most important monuments, immediately astounds every visitor to the city. Located directly opposite the Hagia Sophia Museum, the mosque takes its name from Sultanahmet Square. It's the most important of the mosques built as an endowment to the city during the Ottoman Empire. The Sultanahmet Mosque was commissioned by Sultan Ahmet I when he was only 19 years old. Its English name, the Blue Mosque, stems from the more than 20,000 blue Iznik tiles which decorate the interior of the structure. The monument is the most typical example of classic Turkish Ottoman architecture. The mosque was designed by the architect Mehmet Aga, whose unfortunate predecessor was found wanting and thus executed. Sultan Ahmet was so anxious for his magnificent creation to be completed that he often personally assisted in the construction work. He died just a year after the completion of his masterpiece, at the age of 27. Turkish architecture reached its peak during the Ottoman period. Beside the mosque, there were soup kitchens, theological schools, hospitals, Turkish baths and tombs. During the classical period, mosque plans changed to include an inner and outer courtyard. The inner courtyard and the mosque were inseparable. Sultan Ahmet Medani Square, or the Sultan Ahmet Square, still has many traces of the hippodrome that reminds one of the old traditional ceremonies of the period. Sultanahmet, which means hippodrome, the heart of Istanbul, has a rich, interesting and varied history to boast. During its peak glory, the hippodrome was adorned with a huge collection of historical monuments and trophies that were either made by skilled artisans of the city or brought from different corners of the Ottoman Empire. Seeing people enjoying their Sunday afternoons on the calm, lush green lawns of the hippodrome, it's quite difficult to believe that this is the same place where numerous royal celebrations, chariot races, and deadly massacres took place many centuries ago. The fact that the favourite pastimes of the people in ancient times were chariot racing and horse racing made hippodromes a peculiar and prominent feature of almost all the Greek cities in the Byzantine, Roman, and even the Hellenistic periods. More than any other place in the city, visitors flock to Istanbul to see Hagia Sophia, at once one of Istanbul's most prominent symbols and one of the most important structures in all of world architecture. Although its original name was indeed Hagia Sophia, it's often mistakenly thought that it was named after Saint Sophia. During the first period of its existence, it was known by the Byzantine people as the Giant Church, and only began to be known as Hagia Sophia after Istanbul fell to the Turks in the year 1453. The day that Istanbul was conquered by the Muslims, Fatih Sultan Mehmed went directly to Hagia Sophia upon entering the city. He was amazed at the beauty of the church and immediately converted it into his imperial mosque. Hagia Sophia served as the principal mosque of Istanbul for almost 500 years. The Hagia Sophia has a classical basilica plan. The main ground plan of the building is a rectangle, and the area is covered by a central dome, which is just slightly smaller than the one in the Pantheon in Rome. The interior surfaces are sheathed with green and white polychrome marble, adorned with purple porphyry and gold mosaics. With its massive dome, 40 windows, 100 square metre columns, impressive history, and beautifully restored architecture, the Church of Hagia Sophia is without a doubt one of Istanbul's most magnificent treasures. The gallery level is adorned with several splendid Byzantine mosaics. The frieze and its vaults are adorned with mosaics with geometric motifs and crosses on a gold background. This beautiful apse mosaic depicting the enthroned Virgin and Child is the oldest of the surviving mosaics. The beautiful marble structure in the apse is the mihrab, A mihrab is usually a niche set into the middle of the Qibla wall of a building in order to indicate the direction of Mecca. The round structure in the background is the 16th century Sultan's Lodge. In 1934, Turkish President Kemal Atatürk secularized the building and converted it into the Hagia Sophia Museum. It's Istanbul's most popular attraction and still continues to awe all who enter it. Although the earliest settlements from the site of modern-day Istanbul date from the prehistoric period, continuous stable settlements date from the colonial period, when the area came under the dominion of the Roman Empire. After the Roman era, the Byzantine and Ottoman periods were the most significant epochs in the history of the city. In both of these periods, Istanbul defined itself as a political and religious capital, becoming in turn a major center of Christianity and Islam. Topkapi Palace is the biggest and one of the most popular sites to visit in Istanbul. The main gate, called Babi Humayun, or simply the Imperial Gate, opens up to Hagia Sophia Square. This massive gate, originally dating from 1478, is now covered in 19th century marble. The Imperial Gate is the main entrance into the first courtyard. The sheer size of this stone gate accentuates its defensive character, while its central arch leads to a high-domed passage. This gate leads to a garden known as the First Court. Topkapi Palace got its name from one of the city wall's gates during the 19th century. The construction of the palace began 20 years after the conquest of Istanbul. Passing the first gate, the Imperial Gate, visitors are in the first courtyard, known as the Courtyard of the Regiments. Here, there's a pleasant park, some ruins and columns from the Byzantine period, and a 6th century Hagia Irene church, which is occasionally used for some concerts and art exhibitions. Topkapi Palace is surrounded by high walls. During their 400 years of reign at Topkapi, each sultan added a different section or hall to the palace, in accordance with his tastes or the needs of the time. The second gate has 2 guard towers and is called the Gate of Salutation, because everybody had to salute the Sultan before going through. Above its crest-style door, facing the first yard, is the signature in calligraphy of Sultan Mahmud II, while the 2 sides bear the signatures of Mustafa III. The second courtyard, also known as the Council Square, was laid out in the 1460s. It served as an official representation of the Ottoman state, being ceremonial grounds for state governance. A land wall or fortress, 2.5 kilometers in length, was built around this core, forming an expansive outer garden where kiosks were built, with views of the city and waters. walls of Constantinople are a series of stone walls that have surrounded and protected the city since its founding as the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire by Constantine the Great. With numerous additions and modifications during their history, they're one of the greatest and most complex fortification systems ever built. As the city grew, the walls were expanded, and the famous double line of the Theodosian walls was built in the 5th century. The walls remained largely intact during most of the Ottoman period, until sections began to be dismantled in the 19th century as the city outgrew its medieval boundaries. Despite the subsequent lack of maintenance, many parts of the wall survived and are still standing today. A large-scale restoration program has been underway for the past 20 years, allowing visitors to appreciate the original appearance of the walls. Along the Theodosian walls, there were 10 main gates, 5 of which were used for military purposes, and the rest were just public entryways. There were also some minor entryways and small posterns that provided access to the city. The Mev-Levihan Gate was known in ancient times as the Gate of Rhegium. The Byzantine wall was divided into 3 sections: the Marmara Sea walls, the Golden Horn walls, and the land walls. The walls had over 300 large towers for its defense and about 55 gates giving access to the city. The city wall was about 22 kilometers in total, 9 to 12 meters high and 2 to 5 meters thick. A brief glance at the plan of Istanbul indicates how the city walls have squeezed the narrow and winding streets into a labyrinth. The fortification was in stone and brick, and at most a little marble was embodied. The sober beauty seeks not beauty but efficacy. Their red and white lines have merged with the concrete. Famous for its sunset views of Istanbul and the Bosphorus, the bank offers a uniquely pleasant retreat with its fresh air and views. The experience of the sun going down over the shimmering waters of Istanbul's magnificent Bosphorus by night has a unique atmosphere. The Varlans Aqueduct, which stands in Istanbul, is a creation of the late Roman and the early Byzantine period. It's uncertain when construction of the aqueduct began, but it's mentioned in certain sources that it was completed either during the reign of Emperor Valens or of Hadrianus, whose names it bears. The aqueduct is a two-storey structure that's distinctly marked by the arch. At present, it stretches for a length of 971 metres and rises up to 20 metres in height. During the 6th century, the Valens aqueduct was used to provide water to the palaces of Istanbul, the Achilles bath and the cistern. The peninsula on which the Byzantine emperor was established barely had any water, so for the rapidly growing population of sophisticated systems from the Belgrade forest north of the city, water had to be drawn, which was then stored in large cisterns. The Valens aqueduct, in addition to the Yerebatan cistern, are a reminder of the engineering achievements of the Byzantines. During the Ottoman period, it was also repaired several times. These restoration works made a sufficient impact on the ability of the Valens aqueduct to survive to the present day. Taking its name from the mosque of the same name, the Süleymaniye Quarter in the Eminönü district boasts a number of Ottoman architectural works, and by close association is an eminent symbol of the Ottoman era. Foremost in importance among Istanbul's mosque complexes is that of Süleymaniye. The mosque complex of Süleymaniye was the work of imperial architect Sinan, perhaps the most gifted architect of the Ottoman era. The mosque is modelled in part on the style of a Byzantine basilica, particularly the Hagia Sophia, which was perhaps a conscious move on the part of the Sultan to create a continuity and a symbolic connection with the city's past. Construction of the mosque itself began in 1550 and was completed in 1557. The mosque is surrounded by an outer courtyard with the Qibla, or direction to Mecca, located on one side, along with an enclosed cemetery containing graves and a mausoleum. The opposite side of the Qibla contains an inner courtyard. The Süleymaniye Mosque and complex incorporate the art and genius of architect Sinan, the greatness and strength of the Ottomans, and the beauty and elegance of Istanbul. Because the great Ottoman architect Sinan had also worked on the Hagia Sophia, he became intimately familiar with its form and structure, thus it's not surprising that it exercised a significant influence on much of his work. The mosque precinct contains three main areas: the mosque itself in the centre, a courtyard to the north, and a tomb garden to the south, which contains the tomb of Süleyman and his wife. The tomb garden behind the mosque contains a large cemetery which has grown up around the tombs of Süleyman and Roxanne. Both tombs are octagonal structures in the traditional Ottoman fashion, although Süleyman's tomb unusually faces east instead of north. Byzantine architecture was of crucial importance to the development of early Islamic architecture and later the architecture of the Ottoman Empire. At the time of the Islamic conquest of Syria in the 7th century, Byzantine was essentially a continuation of Roman architecture. There were, however, a few major differences, the most significant of which was the massive church-building campaign of Justinian in the 6th century, which made Christianity the central focus of architecture. During the 9th to 11th centuries, the Byzantines recovered from the disastrous effects of the Islamic conquests, and in this period, there's evidence of Islamic influence on Byzantine architecture, particularly in descriptions of the palaces of Constantinople. The 4 minarets stand in the 4 corners of the courtyard. The proportion exhibited by the minarets and the domes is a product of genius. The Suleimani Mosque is one of the most exquisite examples of the classical Ottoman architecture, given its fascinating outlook and robust structure. Throughout its history, Istanbul has always been an important city. From the earliest days of human settlement here, commerce was an important part of the city's livelihood, and its bazaars were filled with all kinds of items to be bought and sold, as well as buyers and sellers from all over the known world. This commercial activity has left its mark on Istanbul, which has retained its old bazaars, and the tradition of shopping continues to this day in the many malls, both ancient and modern, of this great city. Istanbul's Grand Bazaar is one of the largest covered markets in the world. Today, the bazaar covers an area of approximately 31,000 square meters, with its 3,000 to 4,000 shops, 17 inns, 61 streets, over 20,000 employees, 4 fountains, 10 wells, 2 mosques, many cafes and restaurants, exchange offices, police station, and 22 gates. The bazaar, which is located next to the first Ottoman palace built by Mehmet the Conqueror in Beyazıt, was originally intended to house shops that provided a safe place for merchants and the wealthy people to deposit precious stones and other valuables. Auction rooms and antiques markets, also called bedesten, built out of stone to protect them from fire, constitute the most important commercial buildings of Ottoman Istanbul, forming its busy center of trade. Artisans from various vocational groups have sold their handicrafts on the streets of the Grand Bazaar for centuries. Long ago, a number of commercial rules were strictly enforced, and as a result, the streets of the covered bazaar were named after the various vocations to which they were devoted. The architectural design of roads, which make up other sections apart from 2 bedestens, is not symmetrical and geometrical. It has a scattered nature, which reflects its formation and the catastrophes it's gone through. In this way, it stays away from the closed bazaar style of the West and has the character of an Eastern bazaar. This laid-back settlement, this scattered nature prevents the bazaar from being dull, and at the same time gives it a romantic flavour. The very word bazaar conjures images of old stalls, interesting curios, haggling customers and a circus atmosphere, but Istanbul has its share of modern malls and boutiques, where visitors can find high-end designer fashions. From the bustling Egyptian Spice and Mahmut Paza bazaars to the sophisticated Nizantazi district, visitors will find marvels and modernity, trinkets and trendy. Grand Bazaar is a place which keeps lots of vanishing professions alive with their unique culture. It's the world's oldest, biggest bazaar, where the most variable products are exhibited. Istanbul is a city of wonders, a magical place where natural beauty and magnificent monuments combine to amaze and entrance visitors. With its history as a major capital at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, spanning over 2,000 years, the historic areas of Istanbul were declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO in 1985.